Aura Components Basics. Get started with Aura Components. Learning objectives. After completing this unit, you'll be able to describe what the Lightning Components framework is and what it's used for, list 4 key differences between Lightning Components and other web app frameworks, and list at least 5 different ways you can use Lightning Components to customize Salesforce. Getting started with Lightning Components. Yes, you're still with us. We're really excited to welcome you to the Lightning Components party, and it's a party. When we say that Lightning Components is the most exciting and powerful app development technology we've built in years, it's a bold statement, and we know it's true because we built the Salesforce app and the Lightning experience with it. We think that once you get to know Lightning Components, you'll be as excited as we are about using it. What is the Lightning Component Framework? The Lightning Component Framework is a UI framework for developing web apps for mobile and desktop devices. It's a modern framework for building single-page applications with dynamic, responsive user interfaces for Lightning platform apps. It uses JavaScript on the client side and Apex on the server side. That's a lot of buzzwords. Let's see if we can try that again with words that normal people use. The Lightning Component Framework is a framework for developing web apps. That seems understandable. An app framework is a collection of code and services that make it easier for you to create your own custom apps without having to write all the code yourself. There are lots of different web app frameworks out there like Ruby on Rails, Grails, AngularJS, Django, Cake PHP, and on and on. We've even got one of our own, Visualforce, that customers know and love. We think Lightning Components are pretty special. We'll talk about why they're special more as we go, and hopefully by the end of this module, you'll agree. Web apps for mobile and desktop devices. Again, that seems pretty easy to grasp, but did you notice the order there? Lightning Components were born out of and used to build the Salesforce platform for mobile apps. Mobile is baked into the core of the Lightning Component Framework, and it makes developing apps that work on both mobile and desktop devices far simpler than many other frameworks. It's a modern framework for building single-page applications. Okay, now we're getting a little buzzed. Modern. It's just marketing, right? And what are single-page applications? We don't think modern is just marketing. In the Develop for Lightning Experience module, we talk at length about how web apps have evolved from simple, page-by-page oriented experiences to highly responsive apps that have all the same behavior and interactivity of native apps on desktops and especially on mobile devices. To achieve these interactive user experiences, modern web apps are built on a tightly bound collection of code that loads from a single URL and then runs continuously as you use it. These single-page apps are built much like native apps are, with the plumbing being handled by a framework like the Lightning Component Framework. Dynamic, responsive user interfaces for Lightning platform apps is just applying the preceding ideas to apps you build on top of Salesforce. And finally, it uses JavaScript on the client side and Apex on the server side. It's pretty self-explanatory by itself, even if it leaves out some of the specifics about what goes where. We'll get to that soon. An example, Aura component. Okay, that's a lot of talk, and not a lot of code. Let's take a look at a real Lightning component using the Aura component programming model and see what all the talk is about. First, here's what the component looks like when it's rendered on the screen. It might not look like much, but there's a fair bit going on here. Here's the code for it. This is from a component we'll dig into in detail later. Even before you know anything about Aura components, you can still notice a few things about this sample. First of all, it's XML markup. It mixes both static HTML tags with custom Aura component tags, such as the Aura::component tag that leads off the sample. If you've worked with Visualforce, the format of that tag is familiar, namespace, tag name. As you'll see later, built-in components can come from a variety of different namespaces, such as Aura, as here, or Force, Lightning, or UI, You might have noticed that there are components like Lightning, input, and Lightning, formatted number. Again, this is a pattern familiar to Visualforce developers. If you're not one of those, for now, we'll say that you use the input component to collect user input and the other components to display read-only values. Here are a few more components highlighted in the snippet. Lightning, card creates a container around a group of information. Lightning, formatted date time displays formatted date and time. Lightning, relative date time displays the relative time difference between the current time and the provided time. Note, what's in a namespace? The Lightning namespace provides many UI components that use Salesforce Lightning Design System, or SLDS, out of the box. We recommend that you use components in the Lightning namespace where possible. For example, use Lightning: input instead of UI colon input text, UI colon input number, and so on. For most of the input types, like text, number, email, and many more are available to you. We'll get to the rest of the components in later units. For now, one last thing to notice is the use of static HTML with a number of CSS class names that start with SLDS. We're going to use SLDS to style our components, and while we won't explain SLDS in detail in this module, we want you to see examples of it in action. Okay? Cool? Our component markup is XML, but we didn't say anything about JavaScript earlier. Notice the onChange equals, open parentheses, open curly bracket, bang, C dot, click reimbursed, close curly bracket, attribute on the toggle switch, which is really a fancy checkbox that slides right and left to represent checked and unchecked values. That means when this value is changed, call the controller's click reimbursed function. Let's look at the code it's attached to. This is the component's client-side controller written in JavaScript. The click reimbursed function in the component's controller responds to the onChange equals C.click reimbursed attribute on the checkbox in the component's markup. In the Aura component programming model, a component is a bundle of code. It can include markup, like in the earlier sample, in the .cmp resource, and it can also include JavaScript code and a number of associated resources. Related resources are auto-wired to each other, and together they make up the component bundle. We'll get into the details in the next unit, but for now, you've seen the two most important types of Aura component code. What about Visualforce? The question we get from customers over and over is this: which should I use, Lightning Components or Visualforce? The short answer is yes. Visualforce and Lightning Components each have their strengths. These are discussed in the Develop for Lightning Experience module, where you can find the long answer about appropriate uses for each. Here, let's go for medium. First, know this: Visualforce isn't going away. Your Visualforce code will run on Salesforce for a long time to come. You don't need to convert existing Visualforce apps, and you don't need to stop creating apps with Visualforce. However, you might want to, at least in some cases. For example, Visualforce was created before mobile apps on phones became a thing. While you can develop mobile apps with Visualforce, none of the built-in components are mobile savvy, which means you write more code. Lightning Components, on the other hand, is specifically optimized to perform well on mobile devices. Again, we cover a lot of specifics in the Develop for Lightning Experience module. If you still have questions about Visualforce and Lightning Components, that's a good place to go next. What about AngularJS, React, and those other JavaScript frameworks? Another question that comes up frequently is, how does the Lightning Component framework compare to my favorite framework? Where that favorite framework is another modern JavaScript web app framework such as AngularJS, React, or Ember. These are all fine frameworks. Many people know them, and there are a lot of resources for learning them. You might be surprised to learn that we think these frameworks are a great way to build Lightning platform apps. We recommend using them with Visualforce, using what we call a container page and packaging your chosen framework and app code into static resources. Using an empty container page has Visualforce get out of your way and lets you use the full capabilities of your chosen framework. While it's possible to use third-party JavaScript frameworks with Lightning Components, it's a bit cumbersome. The Lightning Component framework doesn't have the notion of an empty page and has some specific opinions about how, for example, data access is performed and some rather specific security requirements. And frankly, the features of the Lightning Component framework and most modern frameworks overlap a bit. While the style and specifics might be different, the features provided are conceptually similar enough that you're effectively running duplicate code. That's neither efficient nor easy to deal with. Another thing to consider: general-purpose frameworks such as AngularJS are designed to be agnostic about the platform they run on top of, in particular data services. The Lightning Component framework, on the other hand, is designed to connect natively with services provided by Salesforce and the Lightning platform. Which do you think is going to help you build apps faster? Note, we're only talking about application frameworks here. If you have a favorite JavaScript charting or mapping library or other special purpose toolkits, then, subject to certain security requirements, modern JavaScript libraries usually work fine. Okay, let's take a quick and graphical tour of the many places you can deploy Lightning Component apps. And then, let's dive into the fun stuff: the code. Where can you use Lightning Components? You can use Lightning Components to customize your Salesforce org in a number of different ways, but that's not all. You can use Lightning Components to create standalone apps that are hosted on Salesforce, and you can even create apps that are hosted on other platforms, including embedding them into apps from those platforms. Add apps to the Lightning Experience app launcher. Your Lightning component apps and custom tabs are available from the app launcher, which you will reach by clicking this picture in the header. Click a custom app 1 to activate it. Items in the app display in the navigation bar, including any Lightning Components tabs you've added to the app. Note that you need to add your components to the tabs for them to be accessible in the app launcher. Lightning Components tabs that aren't in the apps can be found in all items. Number 2. Add apps to Lightning Experience and Salesforce app navigation. As described in the preceding example, you can add Lightning Components tabs to an app, and they still display as items in the app's navigation bar. Create drag and drop components for Lightning App Builder and Community Builder. Build custom user interfaces using your own Lightning components or those you install from the App Exchange for desktop and mobile devices. Add Lightning components to Lightning Pages. A Lightning page is a custom layout that lets you design pages for use in your Salesforce mobile app or in Lightning Experience. You can use a Lightning page to create an app homepage and add your favorite Lightning component, such as the expense app we'll be creating in this module, to it. Add Lightning components to Lightning Experience record pages. Just as the title suggests, you can customize Lightning Experience record pages by adding a Lightning component. Launch a Lightning component as a quick action. Create actions using a Lightning component and then add the action to an object's page layout to make it instantly accessible from a record page. Override standard actions with Lightning components. Override an action with a Lightning component which closely parallels overriding an action with a Visualforce page. Create standalone apps. A standalone app comprises components that use your Salesforce data and can be used independently from the standard Salesforce environment. Run Lightning Components apps inside Visualforce pages. Add Lightning Components to your Visualforce pages to combine features you've built using both solutions. Implement new functionality using Lightning Components and then use it with existing Visualforce pages. Run Lightning Components apps on other platforms with Lightning Out. Lightning Out is a feature that extends Lightning apps. It acts as a bridge to surface Lightning Components in any remote web container. This means you can use your Lightning Components inside an external site, for example, SharePoint or SAP, or even elsewhere on the platform, such as Heroku. Customize flow screens. Create a flow to guide your users through a business process. By default, you can add simple fields like input or radio buttons to a flow screen, but with a Lightning component, you can fully customize the look and feel and functionality